comfortable bowel movements, is such a huge challenge in the world we live in today.
It's not something that's talked about at the dining room table or the dinner table, right? And I think even with close family, so you're not going to be talking with it. And, it's one of those things that people kind of live with. Digestive health issues can lead to other issues, right?
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Nature City Podcast. I'm your host, Carl Pradelli, and I'm also the CEO and co-founder of the company, having started Nature City over 20 years ago with my wife, Beth, and since then it's been our pleasure to have served over 500,000 Americans by offering them the best supplements we can make. Today, I think I'm really excited and glad you tuned in because we're going to be talking about a novel and innovative dietary fiber called Solnul. Now, if you're one of the few Americans who already get enough dietary fiber in total, stay with us because I think there's a good chance you're not getting enough of the fiber we're going to be talking about today, which is a type of resistant fiber. In the case of Solnul, it actually comes from potatoes, Canadian potatoes specifically. And what I also love about this story is that Solnul is an upcycled product. So what that means is actually made from what was previously waste. So we're taking something that was previously garbage and creating something that's very nutritionally beneficial for our health. To help me break it all down, joining me is Jason Leibert from MSP Starch Products, who makes Solnul. Jason, how are you today?
I'm doing well, Carl.
Well, thank you so much for making time for us. Really excited about what you're doing up in Canada with potatoes.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks so much for having me here today.
Absolutely. So, Jason, as I mentioned, Solnul is a fiber that's a resistant starch. When it comes to fiber, we usually think of soluble fiber versus insoluble fiber. But there's another fiber subclass called resistant starch. And I think even within that, you're going to tell me there's different types of resistant starch. Can you tell us a little bit about resistant starch and why it's so important to our health?
Yeah, I think when it comes to the resistant starch story, I think maybe just kind of take a bit of a step back. And, we're in our communities are in crisis with several nutrients that, we're no longer getting. And RS2, I'll maybe refer to it as RS2 or resistant starch type 2. It was in our diet ancestrally, right? Back, tubers, plant sources, and that we used to get key nutrients from it. And due to, factors and things that in our food processing or just cooking our food, this nutrient has really left our communities and is no longer in. And just to, given it kind of set the stage, there was the average American's getting about 4 grams of resistant starch per day. And so, Carl, you may be wondering, okay, Jason, 4 grams, what does that mean? And that was a paper that came out of Mindy Patterson and her group that were doing some looking at the NHANES database and understanding where is resistant starch coming from. And so the average American getting kind of that 4 grams of RS2, jump over to kind of Australia. So Dr. Topping, who's a leading dietitian and researcher over there, they had this premise that if we, got fiber and got resistant starch back into our diets, that we would see other health issues start to bend. And they actually saw these health issues increase at the trajectory that the Western world's at. And they circled it's the lack of certain kind of fibers and resistant starch type 2. And so that's kind of been 4 grams is what, of this fiber, like you said, of resistant starch we're getting in our diet. Dr. Topping and their group of there in this cohort that they studied, they're saying now we need 20 grams of this. And so we have suggested dietary targets for fiber, as you kind of meant. But we don't have it for resistant starch or other prebiotics, I'd say. So our whole vision, America's at 4 grams, number one source in America. Canada's no different. Like you said, being here from Canada in North America, the number one source is French fries. So we're not going to have, right? We're not going to have a model to say, let's eat more French fries, but we need this nutrient, right? We need this nutrient. And so our vision and our focus is if we could build science, and I know we'll unpack that throughout the discussion today, that we could close that gap and restore health in our communities.
Yeah. So it sounds like Dr. Topping concluded that he probably was looking at a lot of the health issues associated with aging and was able to create an association or a linkage between not getting enough of this fiber and increased levels of some of those challenges, whether it be heart problems, digestive problems, you name it, just through not specifically just fiber, but specifically, as you call it, the RS2 or resistant starch type 2. Is that a fair summary of it?
Yeah, exactly. I think like anything, if you said probiotics, right? We know that certain strains and species, like that's not a fair to say probiotics are good as a big blanket. And I think what we'll learn as fiber, right? There's different tools in that fiber toolbox, and I think there'll be certain ones that are probably we'll find more important to overall health than others. But fiber in general is super important.
No, it is important. And kind of as I alluded to earlier, I mean, I don't know, it depends. I think it's around 30 grams of fiber that's generally recommended. I think for men it's a little higher. I think it's 35 for men, maybe 30 for women, depending on which source you're looking at. But even that, just looking at fiber as a category, I think most people struggle to get 15 to 20 grams, right? And then, within that, you're saying only about 4 grams on average is the RS2 that the Australian researchers found is so important. And just to review again quickly, the two reasons why this is much more challenging. To get resistant fiber in our diets these days.
Yeah.
I think it was sort of dietary preferences have changed and just cooking methods or just food processing in general.
Yeah, so it's a temperature sensitive
Mhm.
nutrient, right? There are those out there, and so when we heat it, that granule bursts, and as it bursts, we cook for safety reasons. Cooking, when we kind of say food processing, it's not to vilify. There's been lots of things positive that have
Sure.
come out, right? In that, but the RS2 granule that can't survive that process, and so yeah, we've kind of lost it, and I think some of the research that's been done from a public health standpoint showing how much is in our diets, yeah, it's just not there. And so our 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 vision, our mission as an organization was, our belief was if we could, do strong science. We're not a large
Mhm.
company, but if we could support it with strong human clinical research, and that we could show humanity, show our communities that this is a nutrient you want to fold in when you're building innovative formulations, and here's why. So yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I definitely want to get into some of those details, Jason, in a moment. But one of the things I just want to, I think it's interesting that to elaborate on a little bit. I've read that resistant starch and RS2 particularly can actually offer benefits associated with both soluble fiber and insoluble fiber. Can you
Mhm.
just tell
Yeah,
what's meant by this? Yeah.
yeah, it's kind of what makes it unique. So we all have the psyllium husks, or the insoluble fibers, and then we know soluble fibers, right? That we have in our toolbox, and um, that are fermentable. And I think what's really, we like to say RS2 and Solnul is kind of the unsung hero in the fiber category,
Mhm.
because like you were mentioning, Carl, it is insoluble in nature, but it is fully fermentable and used by the gut microbiome. And so that's kind of where the magic happens. And there's benefits for, again, insoluble fiber or soluble fiber. Too much, too little of each, right? You can
Yep.
cause issues. But I think the magic happens when we can start modulating the gut microbiome, and I think that's why RS2, and that's why Mother Nature put it in some really pivotal food sources for us.
No question about it. So, Jason, before we get into some of the specific research findings that you've done and I guess continue to do and the benefits of Solnul, the resistant starch fiber, uh, let's just talk a little bit about how this story, because I think it's so intriguing. I think people will be so impressed when they
Sure.
hear about just how Solnul is made, um, which as I said before, is really
Yeah.
from what was previously waste.
Yeah. So yeah, we're like you, a Canadian company. So we're located in Carberry, Manitoba, a small town just of 1,800 people west of Winnipeg. And so yeah, our founders were the largest potato growers in the province. So they're farmers, and you know, love potatoes. Knew the whole model of potatoes and the nutrient. And so, but they're addicted entrepreneurs, right? And they love trying to figure out the invisible and understand, you know, that. And so they got out of farming into processing, and worked with the other, like you said, upcycled the processing facilities in the community to kind of uh, the co-product that was being created from there. We don't like saying waste, co-product, but it is really these starch granules were liberated from their process, and the whole upcycled. And we can, we were one of the first upcycled certified ingredients in Canada. So the upcycle movement's really growing. And we're really excited to kind of be a part of that sustainability, right, Carl? We could unpack of all that, and ultimately the upcycled food association definition is using something to its highest purpose, and I don't know what would be its higher purpose than feeding your microbiome and like human health, right?
Absolutely. So as I understand it, and I may not have it fully correct, but
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
I think what's happening is I assume the potatoes are like cleaned and peeled, and then they're cut up,
yeah,
and
yeah. So
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
Maybe just
exactly.
explain it, because
Yeah,
you probably obviously could do a lot better than I could.
yeah. So they're peeled potatoes. They're when you process potatoes, you use water knives. That water then gets used as often as it can. But like you would cut a potato at home,
Mhm.
Carl, you could see that little white on your knife, or those granules being liberated. We then bring that back to our facility in Carberry, where we put that through our process, and build a product that our partners can use in that.
So so you basically take this resistant starch out of the water, I guess, I assume,
Yeah,
and then I guess the water can be recycled itself, probably too, I presume.
yeah, 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 exactly. And then bring that back to our facility where we're able to process it through our and create a really premium, high quality product that we then can do research on to show really how it's feeding the gut microbiome. So it's very exciting. I think the upcycled movement, sustainability, just watching that organization grow, and it's been fascinating. And some of the data, I think consumers get the last vote, right? We can all have our beliefs, but some of the data that the Upcycled Food Association is coming out with is that 62% of consumers are willing to pay
Mhm.
more for upcycled product. 70% of consumers have an intention to purchase, a greater intention to purchase upcycled certified products or upcycled products. And so I think yeah, as we choose the inputs that go into our products, we're really excited to be.
And Jason, final question on this, and then we'll get into some of the
Sure.
aspects of what it can do for us. Once you bring it back and you extract the starch, I mean, do you have to do anything to it in terms of like enzymes and stuff to make it?
No, no. So it's just water, drying, temperature. As I said, that temperature, something you have to be mindful of, because um, RS2 can change in temperature and all that. And so, yeah, no, it's we use water and kind of those things to produce the
Right.
product.
And whereas, resistant starch, the difference between resistant starch and starch is the resistant starch is not digestible, right? So
That's
usually
right.
starch,
Yeah,
yeah,
and that's the beauty of it, where it passes through your stomach, and feeds the colon and the microbes in your colon, and that's where those health benefits happen.
right. So whereas regular starch, can increase blood glucose levels and has calories attached to it, resistant starch doesn't have that.
Correct. It's a
Yeah,
fiber, kind of a thing. So yeah, it's not that carbohydrate.
great. That's a terrific story. Thank you for sharing that. Um, Now, one of the challenges sometimes, Jason, people get worried when they hear about fibers is, oh, it causes bloating or it causes me problems as it ferments. How is Sonal tolerated by users?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's, as we chase that fiber coin,
Yeah.
right? And we try and get more fiber, like you said, our communities are low in fiber. And so it's going to be really important that we choose certain fibers to introduce them and introduce their microbiome back to that food source. And so Solnul is one of the things is, Solnul is very, very tolerable. Um, just to give you an idea of molecular wise, inulin is one of those ones that
Mhm.
soluble fiber, rapidly fermented, that kind of thing. Solnol is 1,000 times bigger molecular wise than inulin. And so it's going to be that slow burning, slow fermenting fiber. Because as we have, you know, as Mary, let's say Mary consumes, she wants to get more fiber in her diet. If she goes and has a soda that has a ton of soluble fibers in, or goes to that, Mary's going to overload, right? All that stacking of those fibers can be really detrimental to her experience with the product. So I think, tolerability isn't talked enough about, Carl, in my
Mhm.
mind, especially as we try and close this gap, because we can make it taste good. Consumers expect that
Yep.
now. That's kind of, if you don't have a good tasting product,
Yep.
right?
It'd be
And
one
that,
and done,
but
right?
yeah, they're not going to go too far and so on. And so I think we've mastered that now. Putting something that's tolerable that Mary or Adam is going to be able to handle,
Yeah.
right? Is really key as we start to introduce, and as that microbiome shifts, it may be more resilient to fold another.
Right. So I think the level that you've determined Sonal, at least the minimum level that Sonal is effective, is about 3.6 grams of Sonal.
Yeah, 3.5.
Okay.
But yeah. So in our clinical research, our human research that we did with our partners at Nutrisource, when we looked at evaluating, um, resistant starch has been around for a while, right?
Yep.
It's a nutrient that's been around, but a lot of research has been at really high doses, and so 3.5 is kind of where our dose. Wanting to look at that lower dose, because again, kind of going back to that vision, we have to get this nutrient back in our communities, right? This is, and even as we're building the science portfolio and we're learning more about how important it is, you're probably not going to go take 30 grams of something or 40 grams of something, right? There's challenges to that.
No, yeah. There's
And
challenges. There's yeah, it's just a lot to consume, not to mention the cost, right? So
yeah, so our vision is, if we could meet Mary where the consumer was,
mhm.
um, then we could fold it into, you know drink mixes, blends, different things, kind of.
Yeah, no, makes a lot of sense. So let's talk about some of the benefits of Sonal that you've identified from some of your research. Let's start with prebiotic activity and what you've found and how it can help, support beneficial bacteria flourishing in the intestines.
Yeah. So as I kind of turn back to that clinical trial, um, we knew we had to do human clinical work, right,
Absolutely.
in order to get that into our. So from that study, what we looked at was bifidobacterium was one of the key endpoints of the trial, and We now have a couple papers published, peer reviewed. By going into PubMed and searching Solnul, if anybody's interested, or I'm sure we can provide some links on the
Sure.
podcast here to those papers. But yeah, we saw an increase of bifidobacterium by 215% over baseline at 4 weeks compared to the placebo. And so we know bifido is one of the good ones, right? And
Absolutely.
they're one of the early, those keystone bacteria that one needs. And we were really excited to see that that improvement at a low dose, right? All at that 3.5 gram dose. And so the other piece that, paired to that is on the Bristol stool scale. So we saw improvements. Part of that clinical research that we found was improvements at type 1 on the Bristol stool scale, so constipated, that kind of state. But we also saw improvements at type 7. And so those are people that are loose,
Mm-hmm.
right? That kind of thing. And what we saw in our data is we were able to normalize those folks.
Right.
So basically bringing it down.
Yeah.
So that health benefit as a prebiotic.
Which is important. I mean, we don't want to get too gross for our audience here, but
Yeah.
you need your stools to be hydrated and soft, but not too soft to where it starts coming, you have diarrhea issues or something like that. So it sounds like
You mean Bristol stool scale isn't a topic, Carl, at home for your?
We might lose a few
I
folks.
feel it's become mine.
Just
my kids.
yeah.
And that.
Yeah, if we start showing pictures, we're really going to have problems keeping our audience here. But no, but it really is an important thing as people try. Because I mean, we talk about fiber being a challenge. Just staying regular and not just being regular, but comfortable bowel movements. Is such a huge challenge in the world we live in today. So
But all joking aside, it's not something that's talked about at the dining room table or the dinner table, right? And I think even with close family, so you're not going to be talking with it. And it's one of those things that people kind of live with. Digestive health issues can lead to other issues, right? And
not only is it uncomfortable, it's a major health concern for sure. I mean, it's important. So no, so that was very much a landmark study for you guys. I also read from some of your materials, and this is really interesting to me, that Solnul was shown to help promote another type of beneficial bacteria, a class called Akkermansia, if I'm saying that correctly, in the intestines. Akkermansia seems to be getting a lot of attention and more focus. I see a lot of companies in our industry starting to talk a little bit about it and engaging in some studies, because I guess it seems to support several aspects of metabolic health and healthy blood sugar metabolism. What were you able to see with respect to Solnul and Akkermansia?
Yeah, so after we wrapped up this clinical trial, we have this data set, and we're not a large organization, but our chief scientific officer, Dr. Jason Bush, we were asked of what else did you see in that data, right? In that, and data is very, very clean. But one of the things we saw was, and we were getting asked about this next generation probiotic, Akkermansia, and sure enough, we see really robust results, and that was published. We had that published last March in one of our papers. But yeah, we saw a 238% increase over baseline at that 4 week time point. And so, what does it teach us? Like you said, there is a lot of awareness in the category. There's companies that are probiotic manufacturing, postbiotic manufacturing, all around this Akkermansia, and like you said, other folks are for those health areas. But yeah, we were very, very impressed, and so Akkermansia doesn't feed on, or Akkermansia feeds on mucin, right? So a healthy colon produces mucin. and that's what it feeds on. And so what we believe is happening is it's not this direct feeding of Akkermansia, but as we shift, right, your microbiome's always shifting, and evolving and changing depending on what you're eating and all that. Now that we put that food source, we put Solnul in there, we're feeding that bifidobacterium. The environment is starting to change, as it turns into a more healthier environment and not such a dysbiotic state. Akkermansia now can feed on that mucin, and now all the exciting things can happen. You and I, Carl, wouldn't live in a house without any food,
Right.
right? We wouldn't. We'd go to the next house or try and find a house, or maybe we'd start eating the
Right.
walls. I don't know. We'd find some way to try and survive because with no food. And it's really kind of the state we left our microbiome in, by not putting that food source. And so it takes decades, but a lot of weird things have happened when our microbiome isn't well fed.
No, it's like anything else. We do certain things which the headline is it's better for you because of this, but like anything else, there's pros and cons to things we do. And yeah, in this case, it sounds like the Akkermansia bacteria has been a little bit of a victim of not getting, whether it be resistant starch or other things that it kind of depends on to flourish, pretty much.
So now we're learning the importance of it,
Yeah.
right? As science evolves and our communities, do we just learn more? We're learning, now. We never had that data 10 years ago, 5 years ago. Now we're starting to understand that this is one of the really important for host health.
I don't know if you know the answer to this, Jason, but are there any other prebiotic fibers that you've seen where they have data similar to what you have on Akkermansia?
Yeah, we're seeing some of the HMO group have some Akkermansia
Okay.
data. Coming up. I think there's some animal
Okay.
data out there that is available for some other different prebiotic sources. But animal data, I think we got to test it in humans
Yeah.
before we make too many assumptions.
Yeah.
It's a step, but yeah.
No, it is a step in the process, and we look at Nature Say we ultimately rely on the human data when we're formulating our products. And I thought the answer was no. Really, a lot of the fibers haven't been able to show this data in humans yet. So I thought what you did was pretty novel and innovative in terms of findings, which made it all the more impressive. So another important area for digestive health that I think you've done some work on is with respect to the intestinal barrier function in the gut.
Yeah.
Is along for folks who maybe not exactly sure what we're talking about. And Jason, you help me describe this better if I don't do a good job of it. The lining of our intestines essentially has a barrier which helps keep things we don't want, like toxins and other stuff, from being absorbed into our bodies. It's almost kind of akin. I don't know if scientifically this is totally accurate, but I always think of it compared to the blood-brain barrier, right? Where the blood-brain
Sure.
barrier tries to keep things we don't want out of the brain. Well, in the intestines, we have a similar barrier that, where it's functioned properly, keeps things we don't want out of the body. What have you guys been able to see in terms of Solnul supporting, healthy gut barrier function?
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So this whole idea of Hippocrates, all disease begins in the gut,
Mhm.
right? Or that whole and when you look at the stats, 4 out of 5 Americans, Mintel had a report, are still healthy people are still having digestive complaints,
Hmm.
right? So like 4 to 5, that's a very big number,
Sure.
right? That are still having. And so back to kind of our roots or our, you know, um, science. We knew if we could push the barrier or push the limits on research and science, that we could show how powerful this nutrient was. And so what we undertook, we looked at, so we have our gut microbiome data. We talked about, bifidobacterium, Akkermansia, but we were able to kind of twist our arms of our our shareholders, and we were able to get some Canadian. Shout out to the Canadian grant, some funding up here from the Canadian government, and we were able to look at metabolomics. So specifically, we're looking at metabolomics in the blood and in the serum, and so these whole changes, what's happening, if Hippocrates is right 2,000 years ago, that, disease does begin in the gut, then we know we'll have changes, or we should expect changes throughout the body,
Sure.
right? And so we started, and really proud of our work here. This was published last September in one of our papers, but looking at this metabolomics data set, now we have data from the blood, and we have data in the stool, and so we're able scientifically to start making connections because we have these robust data sets. And so I'm getting into how does this leaky gut, or that whole gut barrier function issue that we're talking about. So one of those markers, those biomarkers we saw in the blood, was histamine,
Mm-hmm.
right? So histamine, marker for
Yep.
inflammation. um, and it's like, okay, well, how is that tied back? Well, number one source of histamine in your body is your digestive tract, is your
Right.
gut. And so see, your bacteria produce histamine, which is normal, but you also get it from seafood, other different food sources that produce high histamine.
Yep.
Now, when that system's working as it's been designed to work, your waste is exiting out of your body, right?
Yep.
It's working. But after decades of breakdown and other issues, now that waste and that can get into your blood, cross over. And I think, just in a very, without getting too deep on it, what we're seeing now, we have Akkermansia data. We know how that Akkermansia feeds. We now have that data in the serum and in the blood. Now we're able to understand what is happening. So when we can heal the gut,
Yeah.
right, we can see cascading effects throughout the body. So that's just one example. And so, yeah, we now, Solnul, we've got some really, really exciting research on how that can support that function as well.
So you were able, let me see if I can summarize that. So you were able to look at both histamine levels. And like you said, histamine is produced in the gut, but also we get it from food. And actually, a lot of like things we generally consider healthy foods, fish, fermented foods, even good meats. I mean, there is a level of histamine that comes along with that. And our body has a way of dealing, to keep within a normal range. Because I'm sure histamine, like other things, does have good benefits in the body, right? But it's when it gets to elevated levels where it becomes a challenge. And there's a part of that you were able to show metabolites in the serum and otherwise that show this gut barrier function seem to be improving. Whereas
Mm-hmm.
it wouldn't be as many toxins or other unwanted substances passing through that protective lining, which is to our benefit and health over both short term and long term. Is that fair?
Correct. Yeah. So when we have those junctions closed,
Right.
right, the body's working as it was
Yeah.
designed to
Yeah.
do.
And you did mention the phrase leaky gut, which is one way it's commonly referred to, where those tight junctures aren't as tight as they should be, and things leak into the bloodstream, hence the term leaky gut. So, look, another incredible, benefit of Sonal supplementation. And that was over what period of time? Do you recall that study?
That was 4 week.
Forward.
So that all at that 3.5 gram dose.
Excellent.
Um,
Well, we talked about the prebiotic activity. We talked about the healthy intestinal barrier function in the gut. We talked a little bit about helping promote regular and comfortable bowel movements. Is there anything else you're excited about, or you guys have seen with respect to Sonal and the digestion and supporting the digestion process?
yeah, I guess so. Back to that metabolomics data set that I kind of
Okay.
mentioned. So really, so there are. we call it our Beyond the Gut series, right? Where there was about 5 or 6 markers, and we're still unpacking the data set because it is so robust and it's a evolving area of research, right? Where the community is just learning more and more. But we saw one of the other markers that we saw is takes us into that gut skin axis. One of the markers was 5-hydroxy lysine. So in the research, the understanding there is collagen breaks down, that metabolite increases. So when you look at papers on burn victims or different other situations when there's severe damage to the skin, we see that metabolite increase. So that has now taken us not only into gut health or gut barrier function, but now we are into kind of that healthy aging, longevity, right? Kind of an avenue. So another, and really all this data set is just showing the power of resistant starch and Solnul, right? If we can restore that and the power of the microbiome, kind of a thing. So yeah, that's another area, Carl, that we're seeing some benefits.
Yeah, it's such an interesting thing because I mean, it's just so counterintuitive. We say, well, how can fiber help my skin? That makes no, people say it makes no sense, right? I mean, but I mean, there's just so much that's happening in the gut in terms of all the way it metabolizes all these organisms and all these other things happen. Was it hydroxylysine? Is that what you, I think said? Yeah.
Yeah,
So I
5-hydroxylysine.
assume that's a
Yeah,
derivative of the amino acid lysine or something?
it's a metabolite.
Metabolite. Okay. And,
Um,
but that's happening in the gut, so I mean, and that helps, I think you said protect, well, when you reduce levels of the 5-hydroxy lysine, that helps protect collagen. Did I get that correct?
Yeah, so it's we know that 5-hydroxylysine is a metabolite when collagen breaks down. So we
Okay.
improve it by almost 20%,
Okay.
right? In our research, what we've found. And so the whole concept is rather than having it break down quicker, right? We're seeing that benefit.
No, that's wonderful. And certainly, there's so much focus now on the beauty from within, and it's just
Hmm.
another way of going about it. It sounds like to me.
Yeah, there's lots of tools, right? Like collagen peptides, vitamin C,
Yeah.
like as you know, several that are key. And I think now, kind of for the first time, we can show Solnul or prebiotics that are showing actual biochemical changes, right?
Absolutely, absolutely.
In it. So it just adds to that toolbox.
No question. Very exciting. So another big topic. I'm not sure if you guys have done any work on this, or maybe as you analyze your data, you'll have something to report on it. Another big thing, Jason, people are talking about is the gut-brain axis, right? And the connection between what's
Mhm.
going on in the gut affects your mind, and I guess vice versa too. As signaling goes back and forth. Have you guys done any work here yet?
Not yet. So that's part of that. Uh, you know, um, yeah. So I don't have anything directly to share, Carl, with you and your audience today, but we're going to continue and pack some of the data set that we have, and I think we'll have something to share in the coming months.
Well, that's not that far off, Jason. So
Yeah.
that's exciting. And what else is on your wish list and things that you think may be interesting to research with respect to Solnul?
Yeah, I think sports nutrition, some of these other, I think one of the other interesting characteristics of Solnol is because it's insoluble, it's not drawing water into the colon, right? So soluble fibers draw water in because this is that vessel. And so I think, um, so from a hydration standpoint, I think there is avenues and there's things in sports nutrition that we can explore
Mhm.
further and do some research around. But I think um, we started this journey a while ago, even before the microbiome was as hot as it is today, right?
Sure.
And everybody's understanding. And I think science takes time and research, and all this doesn't happen overnight. And so I'm really excited to see, what we'll learn from other people's work, and then how we can, I guess, how Solnul can play a role in that. Ultimately, achieving health for our community, and driving it forward.
Excellent. Jason, one of the things I always, the audience is always interested in is just from a safety perspective. Is there any concerns with Solnul when used as directed, or things that you should be cautioned about?
Yeah, no, it's a whole food.
Yep.
We're glyphosate residue free, as well as upcycled FODMAP I mentioned. And so, yeah, no, it's a whole food source. So it's getting the food, back into. So yeah, no, it's tolerability we talked about.
Yep.
So yeah, no, it's kind of, getting it back in is the key.
Yep. No pesticide residues or things like that you have to worry about.
Correct.
That's great.
Yeah.
And I know 3.5 is, again, if you take 2 or 3 servings a day, if that would, if you were to do that, I assume that would have no problems as well.
Yeah. So we've seen, used our product at 30 grams, in clinical settings, all the way up. And so what we saw there was no adverse events. So I think, it all depends. I think our communities are, we're short on fiber, as the data is showing us. And so we got a long ways to go. But I think making sure they're reaching for that tolerable fiber is going to be so critical.
Absolutely. Well, Jason, it's been wonderful. Is there anything we might have left out that the audience should know about Solnul?
I fiber resistant starch, it's so critical. And I would just challenge, everyone watching this to find a way to feed your microbes, change your mindset, change your perspective. And I think if we get to a point where we can feed our microbes and give them the food sources that they require, in return, they will take care of us. And so, I'm excited to see where the community goes and the research goes, on that front.
Absolutely. And for folks watching or listening, if you're interested in Solnul, we were so impressed with it in Nature City. We made a key part of a new product that we just introduced called TrueDYB, with the DYB staying for Digest Your Best. You'll find the same 3.5 grams, or is it 3.6? I always get confused. Serving of Solnul in each scoop of TrueDYB, which you can find at naturecity.com. And Jason, we look forward to working together with you and the rest of the team at MSP, and having, helping a lot of people in the future.
Amazing, Carl. We're very excited to see that product come to market, and yes, let's close that gap on resistant starch in our communities. Thank you.
Absolutely. So, folks, that's it for this week's episode. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel to see future episodes. We're also available on your favorite streaming platforms. So whether it be Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, you can find us in all those places. But when you go to naturecity.com and hopefully check out the TrueDYB with Solnul, also sign up for our email list. Each week, you'll get an email alert when there's a new episode of the Nature City podcast that drops. So we can keep in touch with all the new and exciting ingredients like Solnul as they become available. Jason, thank you again. Really appreciate making time, and we will talk soon.
Thanks, Carl. Been a pleasure. Take care.
See you all next week.